The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Yep, baby, that is the More Money theme song. Thanks so much for joining. That, of course, is the Beatles, and that, of course, is John Lennon bellowing it out like nobody else could. So pleased to have you with me. I say it every week. Our ratings get better and better. We have affiliates throughout the country. So thank you so much for tuning in. It is my great privilege and pleasure to be in front of this microphone every weekend with you. By the way, this is the Red Apple Audio Network, and so much to talk about this weekend. By the way, this is November 1st. I was going to say that October is my favorite month for weather and just being alive. Here in the DC area where I live, I mean, the most beautiful weather we've had in the 60s and 70s, and blue skies, and the fall foliage is just incredible here in the Northeast where I live, and I hope it's beautiful where you are as well. It's just one of those great days to be alive. I hope you all had a wonderful Thanksgiving, Halloween. And, I was joking on Larry Kudlow's TV show on Friday that, I dressed up as Jerome Powell. That was my costume. And instead of giving out candy to people, the kids, I took the candy away from them. That's what Jerome Powell does. And Larry got a kick out of that. So I hope you had a very good, Halloween. By the way, I believe today, Saturday, is what is called All Saints Day. I'm a Catholic, and I believe this is one of our listeners may have to fill me in on this. I've kind of forgotten, but I think All Saints Day is still a holy day of obligation. I'm going to have to double check that. But anyway, hope you're enjoying this wonderful weather, where you are as well. So much to talk about. I want to just start by saying, you all know that I love Donald Trump. He's been so good to me personally. He's been good for the country. He's one of the most pro-business president we've ever had. Love, love, love all of that about him. But I'm going to tell you, I disagree with him on his idea about the filibuster. No, we want almost everything to require 60 votes to get through the Senate, because that's the supermajority. We do not want to make it easier for Congress to spend money and to pass laws. We may want to make it harder. And the whole Constitution is about checks and balances and making it very difficult for the government to take power and money away from us. That's the ingeniousness of our system of government in the United States. And it is not majority rule. Okay. This is not majority rule. Our whole system of government was to avoid majority rule and to protect the rights of the minority. I'm not saying minorities. I'm saying the minority. That is the people, just because 50.1% think that they can take your money away from you. No, sorry, that's not the way it works. And so I think Donald Trump was wrong, and I love the guy, and I very seldom disagree with him, but I disagree with him on this. And by the way, if you're a conservative like I am, and we didn't have a filibuster, guess what? DC would be a state today. Puerto Rico would probably be a state today. You would not have right to work laws around the country because the Democrats in the Congress, when they had the majorities, would have gotten rid of that. We probably see 50% tax rates in America today if it weren't for the filibuster. So Donald Trump is wrong on this. He is mostly right on everything he does, in my opinion, on the economy, but this one he is wrong. And I want to restate a point that I made last week, but it is really the essence of what our system of government is about, which is the Constitution is a rule book that restrains the power of government. That's what our Constitution is. That's why every country in the world wants to have a constitution like ours, because we have restrained the growth of our government. Well, not so well, but God forbid how big it would be if we didn't have a constitution and a filibuster and all sorts of checks on the power of the politicians' government. So I'm really feel strongly about this, that we should not suspend the filibuster rule, which requires 60 votes in the Senate, not 51 to pass legislation. I saw right before I came on the air, I saw a very funny Babylon Bee For those who are not familiar with Babylon Bee, they are a kind of political humorist organization, and their piece today is very funny. It has all the Democratic leaders, including Chucky Schumer, at the microphone, and they're huddled around, and Schumer has kind of a puzzled look on his face, and the caption is, "Democrats forgot why they've shut down the government." I thought that's perfect. Do you know why they shut down the government? I don't. Well, I know that they want to have illegal immigrants get free health care. Gee, that's a good reason to keep the government shut down for a month. They want to add $1.5 trillion new spending. Gee, we're only running a $2 trillion a year deficit. And by the way, that $1.5 trillion of savings that were in the Republican budget, that's over 10 years. So it's a 2 cents out of every dollar cut in the amount of money government is supposed to spend. In other words, the budget almost never falls from one year to the next. So that 1.5 trillion of cuts, I've got air quotes, with my fingers, cuts is a cut from the amount of extra spending they want to do each year. So why in the hell are the Democrats 32 days into the shutdown? Why won't they compromise? Why won't they open the government? Why won't they let our military why are they jeopardizing our national defense, for goodness sake? Why aren't we paying our soldiers? This is disgraceful. It is. And I don't care if you're a Democrat, Republican, Independent. I don't care what you are. Come on, get this thing open. Make a compromise. Trump has put out an olive branch. The Democrats are trying to score political points here, and they're putting our economy in danger. I think it's despicable. Let's get this government reopened, and let's start paying our bills. Hey, what a concept. How about Washington starts paying its bills and stops borrowing $2 trillion a year? We have an action-packed show ahead of us, folks. I hope you will stay with us throughout this hour and the next if your station picks up our 2-hour show. This is the More Money Show, and we will be right back.
The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The More Money Show with Steve Moore. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
We're back, folks. This is the More Money Show. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you're having a wonderful weekend. So, one of the people that I turn to when I want to talk about energy and environment issues is Robert Bryce, who is an expert on these policies. He is formerly the energy analyst at the great Manhattan Institute. He has a great podcast that he does where I learn a lot listening to him about what's happening with energy. And as soon as I saw the big headline this week about Bill Gates, basically saying, hey, climate change is not going to be the end of the world, I immediately thought of Robert because he's been writing on energy and environmental issues for so long. And Robert, thanks so much for joining this afternoon.
Always happy to talk to you, Steve.
So, Robert, first of all, how do people get your podcast?
Well, actually, my podcast is now dormant. My Substack, robertbryce.substack.com. That's where I'm writing almost all the time now.
Say that again. What is it again?
robertbryce.substack.com.
And you do that weekly?
I'm publishing about 6 to 8 articles a month on Substack now.
Got it. Okay, so almost twice a week. So go to Robert's Substack. I read it all the time, and I always find amazing information there. Okay, so tell me, what is your reaction to Bill Gates, who probably has put more money into the climate change movement of anyone on the planet, and now he is saying that maybe he was wrong, and maybe that the end is not near.
It is remarkable. I guess my first reaction, Steve, was, well, one, what took you so damn long? But second, it was, thank goodness, thank God there is another humanist voice on the energy front. And the things, it's interesting to see how, the legacy media and Bill McKibben and the usual suspects are saying, oh, don't listen to Gates. Don't
they're beating him up. Yeah.
He's beating him up for even daring to say what is obviously true, which is we're not facing a catastrophe. This isn't an extinction event. And the part that, to me, Stephen, his essay, I thought, on gatesnotes.com was very well reasoned. It was probably a couple thousand words.
Right.
But at the conclusion was key, where he said, essentially, we have to adopt a humanist approach to this. And I thought,
by the way, hold on. What does that mean, a humanist approach?
Well, I'll read this. I think it's important to just read what he said. He said, we should be prioritizing the things that have the greatest impact on human welfare. Yes, brother. Amen.
Yes.
It's the best way to ensure that everyone gets a chance to live a healthy and productive life, no matter where they're born and no matter what kind of climate they're born into. I love it too. And I thought, well, what does that mean to me? As I read that, it means hydrocarbons. They need hydrocarbons. They don't want, they need propane in particular to stop this insane air pollution that's a plague in the developing world that's killing millions of women and girls every year.
Right. So this is such an important point because, as you know, I've learned a lot of this from you, that the biggest problem in terms of, early death and malnutrition and all of the terrible thing, the disease, is that in these poor countries, they lack millions and millions of people still lack reliable electric power in the year 2025 and still lack clean drinking water. And I've always thought, look, for 1/100th of the cost we've spent on climate change, we could help clean the water for these, African nations and some of the Asian nations, and we can provide them. I mean, I read a statistic that there are close to 1 billion people who still don't have reliable electricity. Well, how can you have a prosperity if you don't have electric power?
Well, of course, and this is one of the keys. And yeah, those numbers, depending on whose numbers you're using, but it's roughly 1 billion people. And then further, you have roughly 3 billion people in the world who are using less electricity than what's consumed by an average kitchen refrigerator in the United States.
That's amazing. Wait, hold on. Say that again. That's an amazing statistic.
There are roughly 3 billion people in the world today who live in places where per capita electricity use, Steve, is less than what's consumed by a kitchen refrigerator in the United States. That is less than.
And is that because? Sorry to interrupt, but is that because they just don't have enough electric power?
Well, it's what is the poor countries are plagued by what? Poverty. They don't. You've got to have injections of capital to make a grid, and when you have corruption, grids don't function well. But let's set electricity aside for a moment, Steve, and just to reinforce what Gates said about we should be focusing on humanism. We should be humanists and be looking at what can provide the greatest benefit. So I mentioned air pollution. These are the numbers that still, no matter how many times, and I talked about this in a lecture I gave in London earlier this year. Today, indoor air pollution kills more people. Indoor air pollution from using poor quality cooking fuels kills more people than AIDS, HIV, cholera, malaria, and tuberculosis combined. And
so is that because
these anti-humanists, these Sierra Clubbers and NRDC and these anti-humanists from on the extreme left, these climate catastrophists saying, "Oh, we shouldn't allow them to use hydrocarbons." I mean, it's outrageous.
It really is, and it is inhumane because there was a good chart that was just put out this week in response to echo essentially what Bill Gates was saying, that if you look, folks, at the amount of electricity that a country uses, it's highly, highly correlated with the economic growth. And so you need electric power to be able to grow your economy and to become a richer nation. And it's been I think despicable that we have the United Nations, the IMF, all these globalist institutions that go into these poor countries and say, "Oh no, don't burn coal, don't use natural gas, don't use oil." And I think I read this from you or someone who's an expert on this. A lot of these countries are still using burning of wood, which is like the worst thing you can do for the environment.
It's exactly right, Steve. And this attitude is truly reprehensible. And the world, and the World Bank has been part of this as well. That they're saying, "Oh, we're going to keep encouraging these dirt poor countries in Africa to use renewables." But the numbers are the 3.2, not my numbers, the numbers. World Health Organization data. Household air pollution today is killing roughly 3.2 million people every year, and most of those are women and girls. So to put that in perspective, about 7 million people died from COVID. So roughly every 27 months, as many people are dying from indoor air pollution as died from COVID, and we shut the world down because of COVID.
So we've just got a couple minutes left. I'm talking to Robert Bryce, and he is amazing on this stuff. You had a great report that we put in our hotline this week about how many many communities are saying, no, we don't want solar panels all over our, wilderness and even with windmills. So there's almost a strike going on a revolt against green energy in many areas of the country and the world.
It's absolutely true. And as I say it, Steve, the backlash against alternative energy, I don't call it renewable, I don't call it clean, I don't call it green. The backlash against alt energy, solar, wind, batteries, high voltage transmission, it's global, it's real, and it's growing. And the latest numbers, and I have them in the Renewable Rejection Database, now 1,123 examples of rejections or restrictions globally. And here's another key number. 61 rejections or restrictions in England, Ireland, and Scotland just since January 1st of this year.
Now, does that include things like offshore wind?
Well, offshore wind figures into the mix, but what I've done, my son Michael's created it. We've been working on this database together along with my other son Jacob, and we've compiled them all together. So offshore wind is part of that, but a relatively small part. This is happening all over the world. It's Maine to Hawaii, England, Ireland, Australia. Australia has a new renewables rejection database. My friends at the IPA just launched that. This is my latest piece on Substack.
So why is it, explain, we've only got a minute left, explain, why is it that people don't want wind and solar?
Well, they don't want their neighborhoods to be destroyed with oceans of solar panels and 600-foot high wind turbines. I mean, this is obvious. They want to protect the character of their neighborhoods, and they're concerned about property rights, rightly so. They're concerned about view sheds, the tourism, and they're concerned about noise. And, God bless them, they're concerned about avian wildlife. Like me, I'm an avid bird watcher.
It's such a great point that you made. What is the name of the site that you have? What's it called again?
Well, it's on my website, robertbryce.com, the Renewable Rejection Database.
So I just flew in a month ago to Palm Springs, California, which is one of the most beautiful places on the planet. And they've got mountains, and you look at all the mountains, beautiful mountains, and all you see is windmills. I mean, my gosh, Robert, how is that green? How is that environmentalism?
It's anti-green.
It sure is. Well, thank you so much for joining, Robert, and thank Bill Gates for getting the answer right on climate change. And folks, we will be right back. This is the More Money Show.
The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The More Money Show with Steve Moore. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. By the way, I want to remind you that if you want to get the Unleash Prosperity hotline every morning, just go to unleashprosperity.com and sign up. It is absolutely free. And by the way, one of the editors of Unleash Prosperity is one of my next guests, and that is John Fund. You know John Fund from his many, many years at the Wall Street Journal. He also works with me at Unleash Prosperity. He also is a columnist with National Review. So John, thanks for joining. And then we have Adele Malpas, who's been a longtime friend, one of the smartest people I know about politics. She is the editor of Daily Caller, and they run my column every week. So Adele and John, thanks for joining. Let's get right into it. We got a lot to cover. I'm going to start with the shutdown, and Adele, I will start with you. This has turned into a kind of political football. Nobody can kind of understand why this is I've been completely wrong. I didn't think it would take more than a month to get this thing settled. Where do you see things standing right now, Adele?
I think, Steve, thanks for having me. And I think I am also stunned at how long the shutdown has taken. I think now that the president is back in Washington and you can already see a little more focused on this, I think there could be an end to this maybe next week. They've had 13 votes. There have been 5 Democrats who've not all at once, but at various times crossed over and voted with the Republicans. I really think they should focus on the 3 Democrats, one from Minnesota, Michigan, and New Hampshire, who've all announced they're retiring. They could cross party lines pretty easily without consequence. So I do think there could be some, they need to figure out how to get the votes and, just get on with this.
So Adele, before I turn to John Fund, what are they fighting for? I mean, a lot of Americans are scratching their head. I mean, is this really about, providing free health care for illegal immigrants and not having any budget cuts? I mean, what is at stake here?
The agenda is very thin, and that you had this week the government employees union saying we don't understand it and we want it to end. And I thought that was a very big pivotal moment. They did take a vote after that, and it's still, they still voted to keep the shutdown going. It's been on agenda. It doesn't seem to be swaying voters one way or the other, and it seems kind of like the pointless shutdown. So I think it could end, but when you're not fighting about ideas or voters or issues, it's kind of like, I don't know.
It's all politics. It's all politics, isn't it? I mean, it's just
it's a Jerry Seinfeld moment of a nothing shutdown.
Exactly. Okay, John Fund. So you have been covering this, and I've been on flights this week. 3 of my flights were delayed because of the shutdown, and a lot of the air traffic controllers aren't getting paid, so they're not showing up. This is starting to cause a lot of mayhem and havoc.
Well, I did predict the shutdown would last this long for 2 reasons. One, the major motivation for this is to satisfy demands from the Democratic base that Democrats in Congress fight Trump by any means necessary. And if they had given up before the midterm elections next Tuesday in New Jersey and Virginia and New York, that would have depressed Democratic turnout. Democrats would have been very morose that their party had given up. So I predict the earliest this is going to end is next Wednesday or Thursday.
Wow.
Now, at the same time, I recalled that the last shutdown we had in 2019 lasted 35 days. What happened on the 35th day? There were 10,000 delayed flights like the one that you were on, and there was a shutdown of LaGuardia Airport because the flights controllers weren't showing up in sufficient numbers. Well, what happened this weekend? We are having 10,000 delays a day, and LaGuardia was shut down last night because 2 United Airlines flights actually hit each other. No one was killed. It was just clipping a wing, but that stopped the airport for a while.
That's
we are going to see critical mass in the next few days, because how did the shutdown end in 2019? The day that there were massive delays all over the Northeast corridor and flights weren't taking off, that day Congress voted to end the shutdown, and the president signed it that night.
So you really think this is just the Democrats playing to their left-wing base and going after Trump because they hate Trump? But it seems like the whole, what they're fighting over is so small. I mean, to me, it's important Republicans not cave in on the budget because, my God, we're running a $2 trillion deficit. They've got some teeny weeny little cuts in the budget, and the Democrats are saying no to that.
Well, the Democrats actually put into place these so-called budget cuts. These are COVID-era subsidies for people earning up to 400% of poverty. And they were designed to expire after 3 years. They were clearly tied to COVID. The Democrats controlled the Senate, the House, and the White House when they passed this, so it was clearly intentional. It was not part of a compromise with Republicans at the time. So they just picked that as the excuse. They thought it would be the most vulnerable population they could get angry. But in reality, it is all about placating their base because they're worried about primaries early next year from the left. And if you don't believe that left-wing candidates can beat moderate Democrats, I give you the case of Mondami in New York, who beat Andrew Cuomo. They are terrified of that happening to them.
I got to agree with John on quite a few of this, which is I think we know that Chuck Schumer has gone forward with this mostly because AOC has threatened a Democratic primary of Chuck Schumer, and he caved on a previous CR, and they skewered him for it, and he made a commitment that he wouldn't cave on the next one, and here we are where he won't cave, and you don't understand the issues involved. I also think they are trying to play a Virginia strategy here of keeping, all the federal workers at home. They can all it's very easy to do early voting when you are when you're furloughed. And so they are talking about a much higher turnout in places like Fairfax and Arlington County, where there's a lot of government employees who can go and vote, and they're mad and they don't like Trump. And so there is a Virginia factor here. And so when they when we get the results, if it's a split vote where the Democrat wins the governor's race and the Republican wins maybe the attorney general spot, it will, I think it's what John said, that will be a message that this didn't really work, and they will, could potentially vote later in the week once they see the election results of Mandami and New Jersey and Virginia.
So I saw some polling on, who do people blame on for the shutdown, and not surprisingly, Republicans blame the Democrats, voters do, and the Republican voters blame the Democrats. But I thought what was interesting, Adele and John, and Adele, why don't you go first on this, and John, you chime in, that it looks to me like, a pretty good majority of independent voters, and those are the people who tend to, decide the outcome of elections, they believe the Democrats are at fault here.
I don't think they have made a very strong case. On either the issues of why this is dire, why they're doing it, and that's what you're seeing in the polls. And so I think there is a shutdown fatigue. I think the president hasn't engaged very much on it because he's been off on a foreign trip.
Right.
And I think we'll start to see more Truth Social and more trips to the White House and things like that to get this behind them. But he doesn't look at all poised to, quote, give in on various issues because the polls are indicating they're blaming. I think they're blaming the Democrats. So
John, you say you think this will go on maybe for another week or so, but the problem, it seems to me, John, for the Democrats right now, because I think Adele is right that they're catering to their left-wing base, but that's not where America is. And the problem is for Democrats, they keep moving further and further to the left.
Well, yes. And that's probably going to explain Mandami's victory in New York City, because urban centers and blue states are, in a different universe than the rest of the country. Mm-hmm. And it takes an awful lot for Democrats to wake up and realize that they're not going to have this national success if they're just using New York models and Chicago models and Los Angeles models. What works in those cities does not work in the rest of the country. I would add, though, that President Trump is always in danger of making one fatal miscalculation. He came back from Asia, and he said the Republicans should kill the filibuster and pass a bill opening the government. That would be a complete and total mistake. The filibuster is what keeps us, when Democrats run the White House, the House, and the Senate, from basically turning this country into Europe. And I believe that, Donald Trump has lots of good ideas. That's not one of them.
But sometimes he has some really bad ideas too. And I say that as someone, we just have about a minute and a half left. John, I'll start with you. New Jersey governor's race and New York mayor's race, who's going to win?
I think that the opposition to Mandami in New York is still divided, and a divided House does not win in the end. In New Jersey, the Republicans, I think, have a 50-50 chance of winning the governorship.
50-50.
But absentee voting and mail-in voting in New Jersey is notoriously prone to manipulation and voter fraud, so I think that's a wild card there. In Virginia, I think Republicans, I agree with Adele, will keep the Attorney General's seat, but I think Winsome Sears, the Republican candidate, is going to come just short of winning, and that's probably because of the federal workers who dominate Northern Virginia and have changed the state from a red state to a blue state over the last 30 years with the growth of government.
So, Adele, we just have 1 minute left, but you live in the Washington, D.C. I'm talking to Adele Malpas, who is with the Daily Caller. And, Adele, I watched last night, I was watching one of the football games, and this ad by the Democrats came on against Winsome Sears, and they made her look like a crazy woman, and then they show this cute little blonde woman who's the Democrat, and really it almost looked like the Willie Horton ad. And I can't imagine if Republicans ran an ad like that, they would be accused of racist. But it seems to me, because Winsome Sears is black, the Republican, they don't always play by the rules that they assign for the rest of us.
They are looking a little desperate sometimes in both Virginia and New Jersey, because they have, both the candidate in New Jersey and Virginia have kind of the same look in a way. and they do run. They have tried to make Winston Sears to be the scariest, Republican on the face of the planet, and they've done a lot of advertising that way, and and her negatives are very high. So and they've maybe been slightly effective, but I think in Virginia, if there could be if the Democrat wins the governor's race and the Republican wins the AG race, Virginia will be then kind of declared almost a purple state. It's still unclear. Realignments, you have to look at a few elections to see if it's a realignment. And Virginia sometimes looks a little purple, and you can't tell if Glenn Youngkin is a one-off or if it's a trend. And so we'll look for Tuesday to see any kind of sign of life for the Republicans in Virginia. You could kind of see it maybe in 28 being in play. Same with New Jersey. I mean, it has, I think, it's going to disappoint and be, a Democrat victory because it's just got registration. It's got momentum state. Now. It is. Yeah. It's a blue state, which, last time Citarelli, he came within 3 points, and that was a shock. He's running again. He's run a great campaign he's got a lot of issues on traction. It's as good as it's going to get here on Tuesday for New Jersey. So let's see if it flips, it would be a game changer.
So I just want to remind our listeners that we do not take positions on political races. And so we're just trying to, what I want to urge people to do is get out and vote. If you live in New Jersey or New York or any of the states that have elections on Tuesday, get out and vote. And that is your right and your responsibility as a citizen. But only vote if you're registered to vote, right, John Fund?
Well, remember the old saying from Chicago, vote early, vote often. We don't want to discourage that behavior.
Well, thanks, guys. That's Adele Malpas from the Daily Caller, John Fund with National Review, with Unleash Prosperity, and you read his stuff everywhere. So thanks for joining. And folks, this is The More Money Show, and we will be right back.
The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show. Happy day after Halloween. I went out to this haunted house last night, and it was a blast. We had so much fun doing the hay rides and all of that kind of stuff. I hope you're having a wonderful weekend as well. By the way, when I was growing up as a kid in Chicago area, we used to celebrate Halloween 2 nights. We'd go out trick-or-treating on October 30th and October 31st because some communities had the trick-or-treating on the 30th, some on the Halloween night. And, my God, we would come back with grocery bags full of candy. And those are some of my favorite memories back then. So I want to reiterate something I said at the end of the last segment to just be crystal clear about this. I don't care how you vote. I don't care who you vote for. Of course, I'm a conservative free market guy, so I hope you are educated about the issues, and that's why we have this show, because I want people to understand how the economy works and how we have what's the impact of taxes and debt and deficits and government programs. That's why you listen, hopefully to become more aware of these issues. But how you vote, that's your own vote. I'm not telling you how to vote. It looks right now like Mamdani is going to be the next mayor of New York City. It's not certain. That we'll see what the voters say. But look, I'm not telling you to vote for Cuomo. So you vote the way your conscience tells you to vote, and your education tells you to vote, and how it will affect your family and your community. And so, but you do have an obligation to vote, in my opinion. So get out there. Get out there on Tuesday if you haven't already voted early voting and you're registered. We don't want illegal immigrants and so on voting. So I want to reiterate that point. But Tuesday is election day, okay? Put the little red star on your refrigerator. Tuesday is election day. And if you don't vote, you can't complain. That's my opinion. Now, I wanted to point out one last thing in our few minutes left in this hour show. There's a study that just came out by the Chronicle of Higher Education, and they oversee what's going on college campuses throughout the country. And what they find is that there is very serious grade inflation grade inflation, where the grades that the kids are getting in college are higher and higher and higher. If you don't get an A or a B, they don't even give C's and D's, let alone F's anymore in most colleges. And so what the study showed is that over the last 40 years, the grades keep getting better and better, higher and higher and higher. It reminds me of the joke, in our town, everybody's above average. And so it should be that a C is an average grade, and now an average grade is a B plus, or an even A. And so what's interesting about this study is it shows that the the grades that the professors are assigning keep going up, and yet the ACT scores and the test scores keep going down. So who are we fooling here, folks? This is the tyranny of low expectations. And it's going to hurt our kids when they go out in the labor force. Oh, you're doing wonderful. And they can't read. They can't do math. They can't multiply. We're going to have to do something about providing an excellent education for everyone. And one way of motivating kids, if they're not performing up to par, is not giving them a good grade. We're just fooling ourselves. So, what's the old saying about Harvard? The only thing that's hard about Harvard is getting in. Because once you get in, the average grade at Harvard is A-. So what do you have grades for? I think the grade inflation system is outrageous. Many of you know, I believe fervently in school choice, that every child in America, whether they're black or brown or red or whatever their skin color is, whatever their income level, kids should have choices. Families should have choices about where they send their kids to school. The dollars in our $1 trillion education system should follow the kids and the families and the parents, not the educational blob. And the evidence is clear. When parents have choices, when they can send their kids to Montessori schools or private schools or Catholic schools or math schools or science schools, they do better. They do better. And isn't that what we want from our education system? Our kids to be the smartest kids in the world. Right now, I'm worried about Japan. I'm worried about China. I'm worried about all of these other countries that seem to be doing better on these tests than our kids are. And as an economist, I'll tell you, that's going to hurt our country if we are not graduating kids who are competent at math and reading and have the skills that are necessary to keep the USA number one. Because I'm with Trump. We should always put America first. But by giving every kid an A or a B, we're not serving anybody. We're fooling ourselves. So stop the grade inflation. Why don't you just teach the kids the stuff they need to know? Okay, folks, we will be back next hour. Stay tuned. We've got a great hour coming up. And this is the More Money Show on the Red Apple Audio Network.
The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The More Money Show with Steve Moore. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome, folks. This is the More Money Show, where we try to help you make more money with your investments, with your work. And so appreciate so much everyone tuning in. I hope you're having a wonderful weekend. Where I live right now, it's absolutely gorgeous out. The weather, this is like one of those days you're happy to be alive. The colors here are spectacular in the Washington, D.C. area, Virginia, Maryland. I'm going to, after the show is over, go out into the park and there's something amazing about Mother Nature, isn't there? And the beauty, the natural beauty of this great country that we have. I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to listen up. We're asking you to sound off on the big issues impacting voters this election day, which is Tuesday, of course. From now through election day, go to redappleaudionetworks.com/election and vote. I'll say that again. redappleaudionetworks.com/election and vote. We're talking crime. We're talking cost of living. We're talking transportation, anti-Semitism, all of the issues of the day. So here is today's question, and we want you to participate, so please do, because your voice matters. Would you consider leaving New York City if Mamdani wins? That's the question. Would you consider leaving New York City if Mamdani wins, if you live in New York City? A new poll says the city could lose up to a quarter of its population if Mamdani becomes mayor. Cuomo told Fox News, quote, there will be nobody left in New York City if Mamdani wins. So the question is the future of New York's population a concern to you? Is it? Vote now at redappleaudionetworks.com/election. That's redappleaudionetworks.com/election, because this is freedom of speech radio and we want your voice heard. So please do tell us what you think. And on that tune, I'll tell you what I think. New York and New Jersey, many of you who are regular listeners of the More Money Show know that of the states that have lost the most population over the last 10 years to other states. In other words, people getting in a moving van and relocating from one state to another. The state that has lost the most people over the last 10 years has been New York State. And many of those people left New York City, probably over half of them. So the number is unbelievable. 2 million people on net. That is 2 million more people left New York than came into New York over the last 10 years. That's a massive migration of people and capital and businesses and purchasing power out of the state of New York. You're losing your greatest asset in New York. 2 million people. That's, by the way, 4 congressional seats that New York will lose if that trend continues. New Jersey ranks 4th in terms of lost population. New Jersey, over the last 10 years, has lost roughly, I don't remember the exact number, but it's close to being 500,000 people. That, again, come on. You want your people, your workers and your families to stay in the state, not to move out of the state. And what the studies are showing is the people who are leaving tend to be wealthy people who own businesses and young people. And young people, you want them to stay. You in New York and New Jersey, you raise them in New York, New Jersey, you educate them, you pay for all the investment in these kids, and then they graduate from high school or college and they move away. And so that is a real cancer for New York and New Jersey. And I have to tell you, I want you to be aware of these numbers because New York has lost $500 billion purchasing power over the last 10 years. $500 billion, not $500 million, $500 billion. And you know where it's gone. It's gone to Florida. It's gone to Texas. It's gone to Tennessee, South Carolina, Utah, Montana. And then New Jersey has lost over $100 billion of purchasing power. So I'm not telling you who to vote for. I'm just saying things aren't going so well for New York and New Jersey. And I'm from Illinois, by the way. I love the city of Chicago. Chicago ranks 3rd worst. And this is what happens when, quote, progressives come in and raise taxes and give away things for free and stop fighting crime. And they won't provide good schools for families. You have to move out. You have to move out. And so let's reverse that. And again, I'm not telling you who to vote for. I don't know. If I lived in New York City, I don't know who I would vote for in that election, but I'm telling you, it probably is time for some change. It's a time for some change of direction because, if you got a coach and they lose 16 straight games, you probably want to fire that coach. And you probably don't want to hire somebody who has the same game plan as the person who just got fired. So that is my advice to you. We're going to be talking about all this stuff for the rest of the hour. I'm so appreciative of you tuning in, and we will at the end of the show take your calls because we're live and in color. 1-800-848-9222. Let me know if you live in New York and New Jersey. I want to hear. I want to hear what you think about the condition of your state and your city. And do you think it will be improved by the outcome of this election? I don't live in New York and New Jersey. I actually live in the Washington, D.C. area. We've got a big election there coming up in Virginia, but I want to hear your voice because this is a freedom of choice and freedom of speech radio. We will be right back, folks, to talk about the economy, what's just going on with a couple of the top economists in the country. This is The More Money Show on WABC.
The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The More Money Show with Steve Moore. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back, folks. I hope you're having a wonderful Halloween weekend. I hope you got a lot of candy yesterday. And we're going to be taking your calls at the second half hour of the show. I've left a lot of time open to hear from you because I care so much about your opinion. And I always say we have the smartest listeners in the country on WABC. So that call-in number, don't call in quite yet because we got a segment on the economy coming up, but I want to hear from you in the second half hour. That number, write it down, 1-800-848-9222, 1-800-848-9222, or easier way to remember is 1-800-848-WABC. And I want to hear about what you're thinking about the election coming up, what you think about the condition of the economy. Maybe we could talk a little bit about the government shutdown. Who do you blame for that? I blame everybody. I think Washington's totally corrupt and inept. But in the meantime, I want to switch gears and talk about the economy. We have two outstanding economists. I know because I've worked with them over the years, and I value their opinion and their insights and their intelligence just about more than anybody I know on economics. So Thomas Phillipson, you all know Tom. He's been on our show many times and was the former chief economist. How cool is this? He was the former chief economist for Donald Trump at the Council of Economic Advisors in Trump's first term. And Mr. Producer, do we have EJ on?
Yes.
Okay. And EJ Antoni, who is an outstanding economist. If there was any righteousness in this world, he would now be the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics. But he is an economist at the Heritage Foundation. He works with me at Unleash Prosperity. So, gentlemen, thanks for joining. Tom, let's start with you. And I want to ask EJ this question as well. Did the Federal Reserve do the right thing yesterday? I'm kind of on the fence of this. I could go either way, but what is your opinion about what the action the Fed took yesterday in terms of their quarter point reduction in interest rates?
Yeah, I'm an economist that don't believe in this fine-tuning that the Fed can do, essentially. A lot of economists...
I'm with you on that, totally. Yes, that's why... Yeah, I guess great minds think alike. Why... Tom, let me just introduce you. let me just interrupt you for 1 second here, because you're making why is it that all of Wall Street and all the media is so hyper obsessed about, they might cut a quarter percentage point of this interest rate or that interest rate. By the way, nobody borrows at the federal funds rate. The last time we cut, people say, they should cut rates to bring the mortgage rate down. But back when Biden was president, when they lowered the Fed funds rate, the mortgage rate went up. So I don't really understand this obsession.
Well, these are bureaucrats that are setting price controls in short-term credit markets, essentially, right? So if you're setting prices, you will have a lot of attention, unfortunately. And we have Fed Watch, we have Fed Speak, we have, everything surrounding it. We have, updates on what that governor said at this meeting, etc. So I think, it's an obsession with the financial markets because it's setting prices instead of focusing on demand and supply forces that will set prices. They're focusing on the bureaucrats setting the prices. That's kind of understandable. It's obviously not a good institution, I think, the way it's operating now. And I have actually argued that the lack of data that they're getting might actually be a good thing for the economy because they're too too data dependent usually, and they're an enormous force of systemic risk in financial markets, which obviously they were set up to avoid. They're also enormous force for price instability. They generated 30% in growth in the money supply, and they're basically the ones generating inflation as opposed to stabilizing prices. So I think, the more they can be rule-based, in my view, the better, as opposed to trying to all this fine-tuning and thinking that a quarter point of a short-term credit market will drive 330 million people's economic activity. I think a little bit misguided.
Well, yeah, that's well said, because I agree with every word of that. And, I have a good friend who's a big supporter of ours at Unleash Prosperity, who's a hedge fund manager, very successful, and he likes volatility. That's how he makes his money. And before I turn to EJ, Tom, all the Fed does is create volatility and unpredictability.
You're asking EJ or me?
Yeah, okay. All right. So, EJ, let us turn to you. Thanks for joining. I don't know. What do you think about this discussion of the Fed? I just think that I'm with Steve Forbes and Larry Kudlow. Why not just have a price rule and let everybody knows what it is when you're going to, if inflation goes up by a certain amount, we're going to, raise the interest rates a little bit. If they go, in other words, tell Americans and investors what the rule is and just stick to the rule.
Steve, it's a great question. But think of it this way. If you're one of the 300 plus PhD economists at the Fed, that would put you out of a job, wouldn't it? So the last thing you're going to do is recommend that.
There are too many economists out there.
But I think you and Tomas are making really great points here. And just to show how effective a rule-based system would be, we had a rule-based system before the Fed. We had a gold standard, right?
And we had stable prices.
Exactly. From not even the time of our nation's founding, but even before the nation's founding. You can go back to colonial times, and if you look at what an ounce of gold could buy then, and you compare it to 1913 when the Fed was created, there was literally no inflation over that entire time period. I mean, it's absolutely astonishing. Compare that to what the Fed has given us since 1913. And it's something crazy like the dollar's lost 97 or 98% of its value over that time. I mean, it's astonishing, but that's the reality. And again, it speaks to the fact that, a handful of people, in this case, 12 people, are not going to be able to fine tune an economy. It's absolutely true. This is central planning in its worst form, I think.
Yeah, the problem, of course, EJ, is you're going to put 300 PhD economists out of a job. If you have your way. And then they're going to compete with us, right? No, but there are too many, people who think they know the answer. And Jerome Powell doesn't know all the answers. He's the one who let inflation go up by 21.5% when Biden came into office in his 4 years. So he doesn't have a very good track record. I want to ask you both another related question to this. By the way, I'm not necessarily in favor of a gold standard, but I do think you could take maybe a commodity index of looking, the type of everything from beef to wheat to copper to coal. And, there's an index that keeps track of that. And if that price is going up, then that's a lead indication we're going to have inflation. So we want to pull some money out of the economy. If the prices are going down, maybe you might have deflation. So you have to put more money into the economy. It doesn't seem that complicated to me. But the second problem I see, Thomas, is that there is something that Larry Kudlow calls a kind of growth phobia at the Fed. They think if the economy is growing, that it's going to overheat. I don't even understand what that means. And, growth is a good thing. Why wouldn't you want the economy to grow as fast as it can?
Yeah, more importantly, there's no empirical basis. It's dogma at the Fed and also in D.C. in the bubble that unemployment and inflation has a relationship with so-called Phillips curve. And the evidence for that is very, very weak. But, and therefore they're afraid of cutting rates. We had, zero rates for a decade without inflation just recently, right? So
yes.
That's one example of why cutting rates might not necessarily lead to inflation. But in general, I think the gold standard, that's one alternative. I think in the distant future, maybe not so close, but maybe closer than you think, is that crypto is, fixed supply medium of exchange that's decentralized and doesn't have this monopoly nature of the Fed in order to increase supply and decrease supply. Crypto is for, a transaction, what email was for the post office. They're going to basically bypass the centralized system with a decentralized one. And I've argued in the past, the key thing with crypto, if it actually grows to that extent, is that you're not going to have fractional reserve banking, meaning, banks only hold part of their deposits in the bank. And that's why you get bank runs being so central. And that's why you get all this government regulation of banks because they're afraid of bank runs. The most recent one is FDIC being proposed to insure deposits up to $10 million. Yes. But you're not going to have bank runs with a cryptocurrency, essentially. So I think that's an unrecognized advantage of having a decentralized medium of exchange as opposed to the centralized we have with, any currency that's government granted.
Yeah, well said. And, EJ, it is true that, one of the reasons that I'm in favor of cryptos, and by the way, I don't invest in cryptos. I know many of you listening to the show do. And I hope you do, because crypto's done very well, especially if you've owned Bitcoin. But, EJ, I want to go back to something that, Thomas just mentioned, because we've been writing about this at the hotline, Unleash Prosperity. This idea sounds crazy to me, to raise the guaranteed amount on deposits in a bank to, what was the number?
10 million.
10 million. I mean, who's that going to be? Warren Buffett and Bill Gates and LeBron James? I mean, who has $10 million? I think that's a terrible idea.
99% of deposits are covered by the current 250,000, right? Yes. So we're talking about the 1% of deposits that are not covered. Yeah.
Yeah. And plus, if you go up to 10 million, I mean, who has $10 million? But EJ, what do you think about that idea?
I think it's another case of the special interests trying to socialize losses. In other words, get the taxpayer to bail them out. We saw this with Silicon Valley Bank in I think it was March of 2023, where they essentially they broke the rules and they gave deposit coverage to a lot of money that did not have deposit coverage. And the reason for that is because it was essentially a bunch of wealthy, it was very wealthy Democrat donors primarily who had their money, who were going to lose their money rather, because the bank went bust. And the reason the bank went bust is because they sold off all of their interest rate hedges. In other words, these were financial instruments that would protect them if interest rates changed pretty dramatically, which is exactly what happened. And then the bank went bust, and those people should have lost their money. Those are the rules of the game. You gamble, and it doesn't all, you put it all in red, and it comes up black. And in this case, the taxpayer bailed them out.
Well, I think that what's also dangerous about this, about the folks, we're talking about there are some senators and congressmen who want to raise the amount of guaranteed, that you get, the deposit insurance that they will insure you 100% for. Right now it's up to $250,000 deposit. And I think that's a fine policy. It prevents, bank runs like we saw in the 1930s, but 10 million? You're talking about only a small percentage of the population that would ever, and by the way, who would take $10 million into a savings account anyway?
Right. And Steve, just to show you how ridiculous this is, when deposit insurance was first proposed in the 1930s that you just mentioned, FDR almost vetoed the bill. It was a much larger bill. It had a lot of other banking components in it, but FDR almost vetoed the bill because even he recognized that this was going to create a moral hazard, that this would have essentially incentivized banks and the leadership of banks to take unnecessary risks because they knew the taxpayer would have to bail them out.
Yeah. And this is a key point because we want people who invest a lot of money into a bank to be the guardians of the policies of the bank. And so if you just tell an investor, you can put $10 million into an investment and we're going to guarantee it, then who's going to be the watchdog?
Exactly. No one is, because everyone knows that if you lose, it doesn't matter. Everyone's a winner. This is the financial equivalent
of
giving every kid a trophy. Right. Exactly. Except the taxpayer. Right.
Well, we've only got a minute. By the way, I'd love to hold you. I'm talking to Tom Phillipson, who was former chief economist for Donald Trump at the Council of Economic Advisor, and E.J. Antoni, who is the chief economist at the Heritage Foundation, two of the smartest economists. By the way, could I hold you guys over for one more segment?
Sure.
Okay, because this is a great conversation. We're getting a lot of response to this. So I guess the question on the way out then, before we go to our second segment together, is how worried, and I'll start with you, Tom, and then EJ, how worried are you about inflation? My wife is very worried. She gets angry at me every time I come home, and she tells me that the grocery prices are outrageously high. So what do you make of the inflation situation right now?
Well, I'm a believer that most economists are, it's not just me, that inflation is caused by monetary and fiscal policies. Yes. So it's not caused by other things. Essentially, all this tariff discussion, I think, is very, very misguided, which may raise some tariff good prices, but that is not inflation, which economists refer to, average or economy level prices, essentially economy-wide price increases. Mm-hmm. So I think, the enormous supply stimulus that's coming from the deregulation and the tax cuts obviously has downward pressure on prices. Mm-hmm. And also, what's missed with all these trade deals, I think, it's just a discussion of the tariffs, which is basically the stick used to negotiate with, is that we have federal, foreign direct investment coming into the U.S. now in the trillions. It used to be $250 billion a year the last 10 years, and now it's coming in the trillions, essentially.
Yes.
That's not great for trade deficits, but it's great for our economy.
It sure is.
Expanding supply in the economy.
There you go. Okay, EJ, very quickly, should we be worried about inflation?
I am not nearly as much as the last 4 or 5 years, but I think the Fed showed us this last week that they're basically giving up in any of their attempts to fight inflation. So if we want prices to come down, we're going to need regulatory policy, regulatory reform that lowers prices that way. We're going to need a lot more energy supply to bring prices down that way. I just don't think we're going to get any help from the Fed for a couple of years here.
Okay. We're going to take a quick break. I'm talking to two of the best economists in the country, E.J. Antoni and Thomas Phillipson. And when we come back, we're going to talk about could we get life-saving drugs on the market faster than they're coming out at the snail's pace? Can we save lives with people with cancer and heart disease and Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and all these potential life-saving drugs? And we were going to talk about how we can bring those drugs to market faster. This is the More Money Show on WABC.
The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back, folks. It's the More Money Show. Hope you're having a splendid weekend. It is gorgeous in most places on the East Coast, all the way up in Maine, all the way down to Georgia and Florida. I live in the D.C. area. It is absolutely a splendorific day. So as soon as this show is over, I'm going to get out and enjoy the, kind of warm weather and beautiful blue skies and sunshine. I hope you do too. We're going to talk in this next segment with my two guests, by the way, if you're just joining, are Thomas Phillipson, who was a chief economist for Donald Trump at the Council of Economic Advisors, and gave Trump a lot of great advice in his first term, and E.J. Antoni, who's the chief economist at the Heritage Foundation. So nobody better to ask for great advice on the economy. And before we get to the issue, I want to talk that I mentioned before the break, which is how can we bring new drugs to the market speedier so that we can save lives. I want to just throw one quick one to you, EJ. You're an expert on the job market, the labor market. The Fed said that they're worried about slow job growth. What is your sort of overall take on the jobs market right now?
Well, I think it's in the middle of a transition. Part of what's happening with job growth slowing is the fact that you're getting rid of so many federal employees. We just had over 100. We just had over 100,000 of them, Steve. As you know, they took this early buyout closer to the beginning of the year, and now they are officially being removed from the rolls. They were getting
and that's a good thing.
Months.
That's a good thing, right?
Right, exactly. It's 100% right, Steve. This is part of what the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, keeps talking about, a reprivatization, he calls it.
I like that. Yes.
So instead of government spending going up, if you look at government purchases in the last couple GDP reports, it was actually slightly negative. It has no growth at all.
And that's a good thing.
Exactly. So the increase in spending is coming from consumers. We're seeing the same thing in the labor market, I think. But that does mean there's a lot of turbulence. There's it's a period of transition. But I think once that transition is done, once the drama around tariffs is worked out, for example, once you start seeing the effects of full expensing coming back and the increase in investment that will bring, I think that's when we start really returning to some more robust job growth.
Okay. Good analysis. So, Tom, you and I had a piece in the New York Post a couple of weeks ago about an issue that I care about deeply, and you do, and so many of our listeners do, about how we can try to bring an end to some of the terrible horrible diseases that still affect mankind, whether it's heart disease or cancer or MS or Parkinson's, Lou Gehrig's disease. All of these things can be cured and with American know-how and our great researchers. And one of our frustrations, and I'd like you to talk about this, is that it takes so long for a new drug that is very promising to dealing with sometimes these fatal diseases to get on the market. And as Milton Friedman taught us 40, 50 years ago, when the FDA releases a drug and says, hey, this is going to save 50,000 lives a year, but they hold it up for 3 years, they've just cost 150,000 lives. So it's taking too long, isn't it? And what could we do to get drugs on the market faster?
Yeah, and it's taking enormous time. It sometimes takes a decade for these things to go through the FDA process. Imagine if we had computer hardware and software taking a decade to go on the market.
Right.
We would be on America Online. We'd basically be transitioning off America Online right now.
Right.
So
that's true.
So the key thing here is that there's two things FDA does to slow it down. One is to regulate safety, which I think we should keep. The other one is, since 1962, there was an amendment to the FDA Act, and they are now, since then, regulating effectiveness, which is essentially telling you whether the product is working, whether the drug is working or not, essentially. That, I think, is what's slowing it down, and that's what leads to the large, expensive trials that slows everything down. And we have 85% of healthcare outside of drugs, which is, about 15% of spending. 85% of healthcare is not overseen by government bureaucrats in terms of the quality being delivered to patients, essentially, and that seems to be working well. American healthcare is the norm, or is the envy of many countries, because everyone who gets sick comes here when they're really sick, essentially. So we don't have a quality problem, an oversight problem in that 85% of our spending. And in fact, we don't have it even for drugs, because a lot of drugs are what's called off-label, and that's a term which is just a technical term. But what that means is once you get a drug approved for, let's say, one cancer, breast cancer, you can use it for other cancers off-label, meaning without FDA approval. Off the label just tells you what FDA approved, the evidence that FDA had to approve it for that particular disease. But you can use it for other diseases still, and which have not been FDA approved. And that's usually the norm, particularly in cancer. There's a lot of off-label use in cancer. So if we can do it, if the private sector can figure out what works off-label or not, why can't they do it for the first disease that FDA sits on for 10 years, essentially?
Well, let me give you a good example of something because Tom and I, since we've written our piece, have gotten a lot of response on that, and a lot of it from biotech companies who say they have very promising drugs that have been held up by the FDA for not just months, but many years. One example is there's a promising new drug. Obviously, everybody's getting worried about Alzheimer's because we're getting older. I'm a baby boomer. I just turned 65. And there's this promising drug that looks like they can't prevent Alzheimer's, but they can slow its development. So if you start taking it at an earlier age, they can slow sort of the spread of that terrible disease. So you have more productive years, and there's no negative effects of it. So, I would start taking that drug right away, because it might, I have Alzheimer's in my family, and if I can delay the onset of something like that, why shouldn't I have why shouldn't I have the right to take this drug?
Well, you should. That's the pithy answer. I mean, it's absolutely astonishing. You look at, and I know you and Tomas already know this, but just for the benefit of the audience, you look at the record of a regulatory body like the FDA. And yes, they have a couple of wins, I guess you could say, where they banned certain drugs, perhaps, that were available in Europe or in other places around the world. And the result of that, because they said, we don't think this is safe, a regulatory body elsewhere in the world said, no, it's fine. And it turned out it wasn't safe. So yes, they have succeeded a couple of times in that way. But by and large, they've had a heck of a lot more, I guess you could say, false negatives than false positives. In other words, they have banned, as you guys know, or held up approval for so many drugs that you can get elsewhere around the world that they have cost lives because of that. And the net effect is they have cost far more lives on net, in my opinion, than they have saved. In other words, they've literally resulted in it's literally been a net effect of increasing death.
Yeah, I remember there was a very famous debate between do you remember Jim Tobin, the economist? I think he was at Yale. I think he won a Nobel Prize, and Milton Friedman. And they were debating about regulation. And Milton Friedman said, well, regulation kills people. And Jim Tobin said, what are you talking about? It saves lives. And he said, no, the FDA is killing people by keeping safe, life-saving drugs off the market. So sometimes, EJ, over-regulation does more damage than the regulation itself.
Exactly. And unfortunately, a lot of times it's not just medicine. This extends to, every aspect of life you could imagine. There are so many times, Steve, when the regulators are trying to do the math essentially and say, all right, how much is this particular regulation going to save consumers money, let's say? Maybe a really good example is clothes washers. Right, clothes washers today are nowhere near as effective as they used to be because of all these different requirements on things like water usage. And so a lot of people have to wash their clothes literally 2 times because doing it once just won't get them clean. Or you have to only fill the washer halfway because if you fill it all the way, again, the clothes aren't going to get clean. And consumers end up using more water on net, not less.
Yeah, same thing with toilets. They have these, we're going to save water by, reducing the flush capacity of a toilet. So now you have to flush the toilet twice. So you use more water. So I want to go back to drugs for a minute with Thomas Phillipson because this is an area he's an expert on. EJ brought up the issue of safety. And just to be clear, we're saying we want to make sure the drugs are safe before they are approved, but that let consumers and patients decide for themselves if it's safe, whether they want to use it.
Well, what happens, that's correct, but why the person, if you ask a person FDA to, what they think about this, they're going to say you're crazy. Obviously, and then
why? Wait, hold on. Why are they going to say we're crazy?
No. What they're going to say, the misperception is, I get it to it. The misperception is that if the government did not generate this evidence on the quality of the products, which we don't have in a lot of other industries, that the government has to mandate that you produce quality information in this way. So if the government didn't do that, then it'd just be a Wild West. But that's misleading because the insurance companies are going to clearly demand that these products work before they pay for them, essentially. Patients are going to demand that the products work. Doctors are going to demand that the products work before they use it. So essentially, the public sector is crowding out private sector activity in generating this evidence. The reason the private sector is currently not doing it is because the government is overdoing it. And the private sector will basically step in here. Payers or, insurance companies are already demanding effectiveness of the products, the cost of it, what's called the cost effectiveness of these drugs, etc. But it's just going to be done much more efficiently and quicker than the FDA does it once the private sector is going to do it.
Well, I'll give you an example of where this is really harmful because I do invest. I'm not a huge investor, but I invest in some startup drugs that are very promising. And the problem is, when I talk to people in that industry, EJ, it takes on average, anywhere from $100 million to $500 million, $500 million to bring a new drug to market. And in many cases, too many cases, the startup company that has 1 or 2 drugs they're trying to bring to market, they run out of capital before they can bring the drug to the market. And so that discourages, in other words, if it's going to take, let's say 5 years to bring the drug to market rather than 10 years, then there's going to be more investment in the drug, in the cure, in winning the race for the cure.
100%, Steve. Absolutely. And the other important thing is that, as our good friend Dr. Laffer always likes to say, if you tax something more, you get less of it, right? If you subsidize something more, you get more of it. Well, this is effectively you can think of it as a kind of tax because
yes.
you are making it more expensive. If you make it more expensive, you're going to get less of it. And so not only is it a matter of, it's going to take longer to get this drug to market. Mm-hmm. Let's say it is a life-saving drug, and instead of it being here in 5 years, it's here in 10. Now anyone who could have used this drug over those 5 years could very well die. But the other important thing is that there are a lot of drugs under this kind of framework, which it's not even a matter of they're delayed 5 years, they're delayed forever. Because if a drug, let's say, is, maybe it's profitable with a certain level of investment, but if it needs a lot more investment, then it becomes unprofitable, right? Well, if that's the case, which, as you pointed out, it's going to take longer. It's going to take more investment now to bring this drug to market. That means some of these drugs, in a marginal case, just aren't going to be created at all, and no one will ever get them.
Exactly. So we just have a minute left, Thomas. So I want to close with you. You were involved with Operation Warp Speed. That's how you and I got, how I got interested in this in the first place. And Operation Warp Speed was an incredible success. Everybody said it would take 3 or 4 years to get a vaccine. You all in the Trump administration in his first term got that vaccine out in 9 months. Why can't we have Operation Warp Speed for cancer, heart disease, multiple sclerosis, Alzheimer's, all of the major diseases?
And that's what would happen if you relaxed or repealed this 1962 amendment to the FDA Act, essentially, that things would come on market much, much quicker for every disease. That, on top of it, would, align with more price competition. So drugs costs will come down as well because you're going to have competition coming in a lot quicker than they otherwise would. FDA now is sort of entry barriers for a lot of competition. So if you make it through, it's great, because you have all these entrants stopped by the FDA. So you can basically go in and have a monopoly much longer than you could with more sort of vibrant competition.
Well, it's not just about more money, which is what this show is about, but it's also about saving lives and extending life, and we should do this. So I hope Donald Trump is listening, because he did an amazing job on our Operation Warp Speed. We did Operation Warp Speed for every terrible disease out there, and we can save a lot of lives with this, folks. So we will be right back. By the way, E.J. Antoni, Thomas Phillipson, thanks so much for joining. And I'll be taking your calls when we get back. It is 1-800-848-9222 if you want to weigh on any of these issues. We'll be back in 2 minutes.
The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The More Money Show with Steve Moore. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back, folks. I hope you're having a wonderful Halloween weekend. This is the first day of November. And I hate to see October go, but Thanksgiving is right around the corner. And after the show is over, get out and enjoy the beautiful, beautiful fall weather. We're taking your calls for the last 12 or so minutes of the show. 1-800-848-9222. My producer, Kelvin, tells me that we have one line open. So if you want your voice heard, now is the time to call in and have your voice heard, because this is Freedom of Speech Radio. Let's go to Gordon in Brooklyn. Gordon, what do you got for us?
Steve, great to talk to you. I want to, the upcoming mayoral election in New York City is almost an exact replay of an election that took place about 55 years ago. And I wonder if I could tell you a little about it.
Well, you've got 60 seconds, so go ahead.
Okay. In 1965, a man named John Lindsay was elected the mayor of New York City, and he won by promising everyone everything. He promised the moon, but he was a terrible mayor, and he moved the city in a very significant leftward direction. In 1969, he was running for re-election and had two opponents. What would be called, one was a moderate Democrat by today's standards, and the other was a conservative Republican. And Lindsay wound up getting re-elected with a plurality of 42% of the vote. The other two opponents' total was 58%. And 8 years after his re-election, the city went bankrupt. The New York City went bankrupt.
I remember.
And there was a federal monitor appointed to oversee its finances. So just a cautionary comment about the upcoming election.
Gordon, it is a fantastic point. That's why we take calls from people like you, because it is an excellent point. And you don't want to make that mistake again. And I'm not going to tell people who to vote for. The future of our great city of New York is at stake here, and vote wisely, because, we've seen New York go through terrible periods of pain and suffering and bankruptcy. And we've seen incredible renaissance of New York at the same time. And sorry, folks, you can't give away everything for free, or you're just going to run out of money. And that's exactly what happened in New York in, I think it was around 1976. Let's not repeat that mistake again. Let's go to Jacqueline in Brooklyn.
Hi, Steve. I want to just share with you, I've been working since this past Sunday as an inspector at one of the Brooklyn polling locations. Mm-hmm. And I have had so many people come up to me voluntarily to tell me that they are voting now. They have not voted for a long time, so they needed help with the ballot. They came in solely to vote for mayor. And not only were they interested and excited to vote for mayor, they were interested and excited to vote for Curtis. I think they realized that Cuomo was a failed governor. He failed despite what the polls were trying to tell everyone, that he was leading against this Democrat socialist, and he lost that primary election. So they don't want to vote for a three-time loser. And his track record proved that he is not the person to run the city of New York.
You're talking about Cuomo.
Cuomo, yes. And they were anxious to vote for Curtis. They said, all I want to do is vote for mayor. All I want to do is vote for Curtis. I had one lady that was 100 years old. I didn't know this until she was leaving the polls. Someone told me. She was a tiny little bit of a woman. She came in with her cane. She could not walk very well. I had a number of handicapped people as well that came in to cast their ballot, and they needed assistance with their ballot, and they also voted for Curtis. People do not want a repeat of what they've had with the Democrats for the past 4 years in Adams, the past 8 years with de Blasio. 12 years of destruction of this city and this state.
Well, so, great point. And, thanks for calling in, Jacqueline. Great point again. And look, we're not telling you who to vote for, folks. That's not our purpose at WABC. It's not my purpose for the More Money Show. We're just saying, listen to what these candidates are saying and make up your own decision whether this is the right course to go for New York City, or if it's New Jersey that you live in. You've got a big election there as well. I'm going to just read briefly from a column that was in the Washington Post from a British columnist named Michael Lynn, who was talking about what happened in London. They have a new mayor who was a member of the Labour Party. That's the left-wing party in Britain. And that mayor is Sadiq Khan. And so here is what this columnist wrote. And by the way, this is not a conservative columnist. If anything, he kind of leans left. Here is what he writes in the Washington Post. And listen to how this might relate to your situation in New York City or in New Jersey or wherever you live. And here's what he writes. Quote, as New York prepares to elect a left-wing mayor, perhaps voters there should reflect on London's lessons, because their city could easily be going the same way. The depreciation of the British capital's once powerhouse economy is becoming more obvious every day. Let me stop there for a second and say, does this sound at all familiar to you? If you live in New York, or if you live in Chicago, or if you live in Minneapolis, this is, I'm going to say it again. The depreciation of the British capital's once powerhouse economy in London is becoming more obvious every day. Okay. I'm going to continue with this piece. The city of London used to be the key financial hub for all of Europe. This year, it dropped out of the list of the top 20 initial public offering markets in the world, overtaken by Mexico and Oman. Major British companies have shifted their listings to New York, while some newer ones don't even bother considering London. Likewise, the glitzy skyscrapers that had started to line the Thames are no longer getting built, with projects such as the planned Tulip skyscraper blocked. Indeed, hardly anything gets built anymore in London, with new housing starts down 38% year over year. The Labour Party's Sadiq Khan is now in his third term as mayor and has partnered with the Labour government in power nationally to crush the economic life and energy out of the city. I'm going to say that again, folks, because this is a warning to New York City. I'm going to say this again. The Labour Party's Sadiq Khan is now in his third term as mayor and has partnered with the Labour government in power nationally to crush the economic life and energy out of the city. So folks, be very careful we do not want to see this. New York is the most important city in the world, for goodness sakes. I know people in Washington think it's Washington DC. No, it's New York City. It is Gotham. It is our empire city. We need it to be the financial capital of the world. We cannot allow it to go down the drain. Do we have time for one more caller, Mr. Producer?
Yes, we have Linda in Long Island.
Linda, you're our last caller. We literally have 2 minutes left. Thanks for calling in. What do you got for us?
Okay. Hi, Steve. Okay, quickly.
Very quickly, because we got 90 seconds.
Discussing the drugs. Yeah, the drugs. You're talking about legitimate. I should really warn people. 26 years ago, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I kept hearing this thing all the time on the radio about this great pill. And I don't know if you remember, it was Bob Guccione. I don't know if you remember on, never mind, I won't tell you the show. Okay, everybody believed it. This pill is a miracle pill. So I went to the doctor and I wanted that pill. And then I was lucky, of course, it was ridiculous, fraud. And, nobody knows that. I mean, they have to watch out for the fraud.
Did it work?
No, are you kidding? He said to me that, that's crazy. You have to have chemo. And I did, and I'm here 26
You're
years
still
later.
Here. You're still with us. So what saved your life?
Thank God for listening to you.
What saved your life? Was it the chemo?
Yeah, the operation, chemo, and radiation, everything. Everything.
Well, thank God
then I was 100%.
You're cancer free today?
Yes.
Oh my God.
26 years.
What a great story.
I went to the doctor. I believed it. Everybody believed it. You have to watch out for the fraud too. I mean, these drugs that are, I agree about that. They should be used. If it's been tested and everything. But if somebody goes on the radio, anywhere and says, this is going to cure you, this pill, we all believed it.
Well, so look, here's the point. And it's a great call, and thank God you're still with us and you're cancer free. I love that story. All I'm saying is people should have the right to try these things. And, somebody say, this is going to cure you. You should do your homework and find out whether it really works. But I really worry that drugs that can cure you are being kept off the market. And this is America, and what you put in your own body should be your own, be up to you, not the government. But I'm a libertarian. That's my overall philosophy. Folks, I hope you have a great, great weekend. It has been a real pleasure to be with you the last 2 hours. I always so appreciate that the great John Catsimatidis, who's the owner of this radio station, has rebuilt it into such a powerhouse that I get this privilege of being with you every Saturday afternoon from 1 to 3. Have a great weekend, folks, and we'll be back same bat time, same bat channel on The More Money Show next Saturday at 1 p.m.
Thanks for listening to More Money with Steve Moore. You can hear More Money with Steve Moore Saturday afternoons at 1. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder,
what the heck is going on here?